is important. I mean, Indian country is not a monolith. Tribes are diverse. We have diverse cultures and histories, and I think when it comes to Cherokee Nation, that's a good way to sort of learn about Native American history broadly, because there's common themes. I mean, you can talk about and explore our forced removal, the Trail of Tears, the removal of Cherokee across the United States. Saw an Indian who starts exploring that part of our history. I think we get coming up. What this country did that was in terms of honoring tribes and recognizing tribal sovereignty. I think thinking about the fact that the United States movement, the founding of this country, and right to a delegate to Congress. And you think about that, a nearly 200-year-old delegate to the House of Representatives. That's a living document. That's a document that still the law of the land. So talking about the fact that there are rights that emerge secure. And Native Americans, whether you're Native American or not, can get behind that idea that America ought to keep its promise. And then we have a beautiful culture, we have a wonderful language that had been in danger. People can explore how the Cherokee Nation is revitalizing its language. There's a lot to learn across all of Indian country on a lot of this.
And you mentioned your representative in Congress recently elected by the Cherokee Nation in terms of getting more representatives in office.
A mix of frustration, but also taking a long view on this subject. It's a 200-year-old treaty right. We asserted it for the first time in 2019 when I nominated Kim Teague and our council confirmed her, and they did that again earlier this year. The frustrating part is, to me, it's a simple proposition. The language is set in the treaty that Congress, the United States, can choose the only correct path. There's a lot of gray area here. There is a promise, and a promise ought to be kept. So there's the frustrating part. The part that is where I need to exercise patience is to know that nothing in this country, when it comes to Native people or other marginalized populations, persisted so much on this right. A promise made to the Indian country.
Somebody covers Congress. I also hope for that same thank you so much. I would like to thank you for being with us this
and exploded at the Rainbow Bridge border checkpoint in Niagara Falls. And we're expecting an update from New York Governor Kathy Hochul any minute now. We'll bring that to you live as soon as it starts. Meanwhile, NBC News has obtained exclusive video. You can see it right here. The car going extremely fast as it hits a checkpoint structure in the road. It goes airborne before bursting into flames. Incredible to watch. Right now, authorities are investigating whether the crash was intentional. New York Governor Kathy Hochul again is on her way to the scene as we speak. You can see where it happened right here, on the border between upstate New York and Canada. Tonight, all western New York bridge crossings into the U.S. are shut down. You can see it here on your screen. And Amtrak has suspended services between New York and Canada. Bystander video shows this huge fire following the incident. And to be clear, there is still a lot we do not know. So, what do we know? Well, the car was on the U.S. side of the border. At least one person in the vehicle is dead, and there is no evidence of an explosive in the car. And again, this is significant, not just because of the unknown nature of the incident, but also because it happens on one of the busiest travel days of the year. Ken Delaney now is the latest on the investigation. Kelly O'Donnell was traveling with the president, who was briefed just hours ago on the incident. We also also have Clint Watts, our national security analyst, with us. And let's start with Ken. Again, Ken, as we await this press conference from the governor, this crash happened a short time ago. We know it's early in the investigation, but what are investigators looking at as they try and piece this together?
Well, Gabe, after they learned that there was not a vehicle explosive device inside that vehicle, that was a crucial finding. They then moved to start to determine who are these people who are driving, where were they before they arrived at that checkpoint, what is on their social media, what can their relatives say about them. Those are the kind of steps that they would be taking to try to determine whether there was any evidence of an intentional attack or whether there was some kind of accident, medical emergency, impaired driving, some other kind of incident. And so that's the kind of investigative steps that they've been taking. But you described the perfect storm that we're in right now with a heightened state of threat on the busiest travel day of the year. And that explains, I think, why authorities have taken some of these dramatic steps, including shutting down Amtrak service into Canada, closing the checkpoints, a travel nightmare, and we're not sure exactly what happened.
And I want to bring in Kelly O'Donnell right now. Again, she is traveling with the president in Nantucket right now. And again, Kelly, we're awaiting that news conference with Governor Kathy Hochul. But what are you hearing from the White House right now?
Well, Gabe, they're trying to bring in information from federal resources, from law enforcement on the ground, and from state officials. At this point, by processing the information coming in from the scene, that allows the president to try to ask questions about what federal resources may be necessary and what other steps or precautions should be considered or taken. So at this point, it is the White House trying to learn more about what has happened, to try to offer support to New York and to those who are on the ground, and to assess, is there something larger here? It comes at a time when the president, here with his family on Nantucket, has also been deeply involved in the Israel-Hamas hostage deal, with a number of calls to world leaders today who are involved in that. And then, in addition to that, the president making time for his team to give him a briefing on what has transpired with this Rainbow Bridge area that connects the U.S. and Canada at Niagara Falls. For all the reasons you've discussed, the timing of the holiday, the heightened travel time, the concerns about the sort of tense nature of the world we're in right now, all of that comes to play and becomes part of what the president has to review in terms of next steps or resources that might be available. At this point, they need more information to get a better picture of what they're looking at here, from accident to intentional act to something more than that. So we are expecting to hear from the president as there are developments. Nothing today on his schedule. They have already called the lid for the day, meaning no planned public events for the president. Tomorrow, obviously, Thanksgiving. And as the situation warrants, we certainly expect to get additional updates from officials who are with the president here. He's got his team that can brief him on all matters, domestic and international. And he is obviously watching this closely based on the officials we've checked in with. Gabe?
Yeah, and Kelly, you know, as we've said, crossings into the U.S. are shut down. The FBI is investigating. Federal officials have been cautioning us that the situation is very fluid right now. And you mentioned the president getting briefed, and he can do this, obviously, with his national security team in Nantucket. But how much does the White House, how big of a concern is this? Could this be for the White House with Thanksgiving right around the corner? And you mentioned with the recent events around the world, how significant is the concern here for federal officials and for the Biden administration as they look at this?
Well, certainly when there is any kind of widespread situation that affects the travel of many Americans, that reflects on the decision makers. And so when you're talking about the kind of travel that's involved with the Thanksgiving holiday, they want to not expose many Americans to inconvenience, disappointment, and not getting things to their families and so forth. So they've got to weigh that against the concerns they have about not knowing what the picture is here. Is there a potential threat? Is there a need to simply reduce resources from law enforcement? So if you aren't having certain activity like the use of Amtrak, like international flights, that just reduces the area that officials have to keep an eye on. And of course, we know that at this time, with the hostilities in the Middle East, with reports we've frequently had, and most recently from the FBI director, always talking about the dangers of potential lone threat actors inside the U.S., until we know what this is, All of those possibilities have to be considered, and they want to take prudent action, but they also want to balance that to not inconvenience people unnecessarily at a time when there could be a lot of criticism for that, when people simply want to get to their families. So finding that balance is a difficult task.
Kelly O'Donnell, thanks so much. She's traveling with the president in Nantucket. But as we look at these live pictures of that news conference that we're waiting from New York's Governor Kathy Hochul, I want to bring in NBC News and MSNBC law enforcement analyst Carmen Bess. And Carmen, we've been seeing action from law enforcement at the state and federal level here. What does this tell you about the situation, and what do you make of that latest reporting? We're seeing that surveillance video of that car going into the air on the U.S. side of the border.
Well, Gabe, like everyone has been saying, there's a great deal of concern about, the security, national security, starting. Could this be a terrorist act? Could it be coordinated? As we're getting more information early on, obviously, we are finding that there wasn't, IED on board or an incendiary device on board the car. It was going at a high rate of speed, clearly crashed and basically exploded upon landing. So now the questions are to be asked about why, who was in the car, why did this happen, was there some intent, is there someone else involved, or could there be someone else involved? And in these situations, until you have definitive answers, you cannot be too careful about what might happen. If you remember, in 2000, Seattle shut down all events for New Year's because there was a potential terrorist threat, which was found to be true. Personnel will focus on in the coming hours? Well, we definitely want to know who the associates are and was this part of some ideology? Was this the individual or an actor? Was this attempt, suicide attempt? We really want to know the motive more than anything because that will help, inform the level of security that we need to have something like this. And in some cases, a lot of things may be canceled if there's an identified risk and threat conversation. So all of these are the questions that the key officials want to know from the media that they really can answer about people that they're expecting all the parts of the because we rush to a conclusion. And certainly, how do recent world events play into all this? The heightened state of alert, is it something that law enforcement can't rule out terrorism? But again, as we're looking at these live pictures, we're waiting that news conference from New York Governor Kathy Hochul. What would you tell folks that can actually see her coming to the election? We are waiting. We're going to pause now for an NBC News special report.
This morning, a car going at a very high rate of speed crashed into the median at Niagara Street just minutes from here. It's in the city of Niagara Falls. near one of the border crossings into Canada, the Rainbow Bridge. There are 4 border crossings here in Western New York. This is one of the busiest crossings, not just in Western New York, along the entire U.S.-Canadian border. And it happens on the busiest travel day of the year. So naturally, in a time of heightened alert, everyone sprang into action. They crashed into a Customs and Border Patrol booth, and the car and the booth immediately exploded. Burst into flames. I saw the video of an airborne vehicle that was absolutely surreal. You actually had to look at it and say, was this generated by AI? Because it was so surreal to see how high in the air this vehicle went, and then the crash, and the explosion, and the fire. That video will be released very shortly. As I said, you're not aware of any threats to this area. What? I state the caveat that the investigation is ongoing. If you can imagine, this vehicle basically incinerated. Nothing is left but the engine. The pieces are scattered over 13, 14 weeks. So it's a lot to see. And it's going to take a lot of time for our federal law enforcement partners, so we can here today on to be able to piece together the real story. To identify the maker of the car, obviously there was not a license plate. I've been briefed by law enforcement for the last hour. New York State Police. Also was on the phone with Secretary of Homeland Security Mayorkas. The FBI Director Christopher Gray has reached out. The White House has reached out. My staff has been in communication with all of them. I spoke with Senator Schumer, Senator Gillibrand, Congressman Higgins, local law enforcement, as well as local elected officials, because the world is watching to find out what happens here. And again, at a time when there's such heavy anxiety, stress levels are already high. We've been on alert since October 7th. That's why it's so important for me to stand here and tell the world based on what we know at this moment. And again, anything can change. There is no sign of terrorist activity with respect to this crash. We've identified that this is a Western New York. Doing a bit of a study of the vehicle. There's also a very business travel day here that may be disturbed. Bridge, which was open, is already open. Be open half an hour ago. For those traveling by train, unfortunately, Amtrak has temporarily suspended its cross-border service between New York State and Canada. And the Buffalo Airport, despite early reports, the Buffalo Airport was never closed, and everything is normal. Domestic flights are still active. There has been no cessation in service there. What I want to do at this time is extend my extreme gratitude to all of our partners. Customs and Border Patrol, Homeland Security, FBI, our state police, local sheriffs from Niagara County, Erie County, all stepped up to assist in trying to identify what exactly transpired here beginning at 11:27 a.m. this morning. They gave up their time for their families. They showed up. They reminded us that there are people who put on a uniform every single day, put themselves themselves in harm's way. The people out there on that bridge. The immediate aftermath of what happened, unknown. The source, the cause of this explosion, were out there doing their jobs. So I want to pause to give them just the gratitude of a governor and 20 million New Yorkers who sleep better at night because of their willingness to do this. They run toward danger. They should be with their families today. They will not be. This investigation will go on for a number